Today on Beloved Women.
We desperately need this lesson in our lives now more than ever. We live in such a time of comparison and people pleasing. So much so, we have made the thoughts of others an idol.
Thank you so much for tuning in to Beloved Women, where we encourage, uplift, and equip women in the love of Jesus Christ and the truth of God's Word. For even more free resources from Beloved Women and to subscribe to our weekly devotion, I invite you to visit belovedwomen.org. Now enjoy today's video with me, Christina Patterson.
Hello, beloved. We are continuing our already free Bible study series through the book of Galatians. Today's text covers a topic that I believe is extremely important and relevant for our generation. I want to talk about finding freedom from the opinions of others. Now, this isn't something we're quick to admit to. We would rather carry on like we don't care what other people think about us. But beloved is a safe place. We can be honest here. We do care. And you know what? That's human. Our God-given drive to connect with others creates an environment where we do care what others think of us because it affects how we connect with them. However, the problem occurs when the opinion of others becomes more important than the opinion of God. It's then that we give up the freedom of knowing we are secure in God's good thoughts about us and fall slaves to the opinion of others. This week, I want to focus on not allowing the opinions of others to control and enslave us, and especially prevent us from completing the purpose that God has given us. In his letter to the Galatians, Paul addresses this same concern. Last week, we learned that false teachers came to the churches in Galatia and started sharing a false gospel with them. Instead of preaching salvation by grace through faith, they were convincing the Galatians that that was not enough to be saved and that the Galatians would also need to take on their Jewish customs. Now, this doesn't seem appealing compared to the true gospel that Paul originally preached to them. So why would they be lured away to a false gospel that would require more work of them? Well, one of the reasons was that these false teachers not only attacked the gospel Paul preached, they also attacked Paul himself. By discrediting Paul and his authority to preach the gospel in the first place, they were successful at convincing the Galatians to turn from the true gospel. These false teachers brought up Paul's sinful past, which we'll talk about more next week, and also his relationship or lack thereof with more respected Jewish leaders. So in the first part of Galatians chapter 1, Paul defends the gospel. He reiterates the true gospel that he left them with and says that they are saved by grace through faith. But in verses 11 through 24, Paul starts to defend himself. Now, I don't want you to think of his defense in a self-righteous kind of way. Actually, he does no boasting of himself, but he does set the record straight that he does in fact have the authority to preach the gospel, not because of who he is, but because of who called him. In Galatians 1, 10 through 13, he says, "Am I now trying to win the approval of human beings or of God? Or am I trying to please people? If I were still trying to please people, I would not be a servant of Christ. I want you to know, brothers and sisters, that the gospel I preached is not of human origin. I did not receive it from any man, nor was taught it. Rather, I received it by revelation from Jesus Christ." Let's look carefully at what he says here. If I were still trying to please people, I would not be a servant of Christ. We are either servants of Christ or slaves to the opinion of others. But Paul is not only saying, I'm not here to please man. He explains why. The gospel message he received was not from man, but from a revelation from Jesus Christ himself. Paul did not hear a conference speaker or sermon or receive the gospel tract. He got his message straight from God, not man. And because Paul is more concerned with the opinion of God than the opinion of man, he is not fazed by the false teachers trying to ruin his reputation. Paul makes it clear he is not working so hard to gain man's approval because man did not give him his mission. God did. I want to ask you a question today. Who are you trying to please? I want you to search your heart deep on this one. If you're washing the dishes and cleaning the house and your heart is cold and you're growing more and more angry, thinking about how no one helps you and thanks you for what you do around the house, are you working for the approval of your family or of God? If you're at work and you're bitter that your boss doesn't give you enough credit or pat you on the back enough, who are you trying to please? If you feel you constantly need to defend yourself to other people, who are you trying to please? If you get discouraged because you don't have that many social media likes or comments or hearts as someone else, who are you trying to please? There is a difference between serving others because that is what God called you to do and working for their approval. Which one are you doing? Because your answer to that question is the difference between living free in Christ and living as a slave to the opinion of others. The opinion of these false teachers did not get Paul off focus. He knew he did not answer to them. He answered to God, the one who called him in the first place. We cannot forget that our purpose and our value come from God, not from what others think of us. Paul did not need to answer these false teachers when he was called by God. In the same way, we do not need to worry about the opinion of others when it concerns doing what God has called us to do. Now, please do not hear me saying we do not need to respect authority or listen to wise counsel, because I do believe God places those things in our life to help and guide us in our purpose. But I'm talking about when our work for God turns into manipulating someone's opinion of us. Either we want them to notice us, we want to change their negative view of us, or we want to ensure that we maintain their positive view of us. That's not why we work. That's not why we answer God's call on our life. But that is exactly how we become slaves to the opinion of others. We desperately need this lesson in our lives now more than ever. We live in such a time of comparison and people pleasing. So much so, we have made the thoughts of others an idol. The purpose God has called you to may be challenged like Paul's, but when you know who calls you, you have the freedom to boldly and unapologetically be the woman that God is calling you to be. Starting Beloved Women was a challenge for me and brought out and is still bringing out my personal struggle with caring too much about what others think of me. Will people like what I say? What if they disagree with me? I don't want to be too controversial, or some of the things that I think about. And the list goes on. But one thing that God keeps reminding me is that the purpose He has placed on my life is so much bigger than what others simply think about it. God reminds me that there is some woman that will wake up today depressed, ready to give up, and suffocating from the lies the enemy is bombarding her with. She needs God's truth. She needs a kind sister to guide her into God's love. She needs this ministry. I can't afford to be concerned with the thoughts of others, so much so that I'm not free to minister to my sisters, the very thing that I'm called to do. So I have to push through. I have to keep moving. That's the example that Paul sets for us today. He could have been discouraged by these false teachers talking bad about him. He could have been paralyzed in his calling from fear of what the Galatians might now think of him. But he did not, because he knew whose opinion mattered most: our God's. And let me tell you this, God thinks good thoughts about you. He is always thinking loving thoughts about you. He is not like man looking to point out your mistakes. He knows your potential because He placed it in you. So we can go forth today, let people think what they may, and continue to do what God calls us to do. And I pray that we will, because the last thing this dying world needs are women who shrink back at the opinions of others. Not when we are the solution to the problems around us and the light to this dark world. We are free from the opinion of man because we are already approved and accepted by God. So let's live like it. Now let's keep this conversation going, beloved. Comment and let me know. Whose opinion do you think women have become slaves to the most? Their kids, their spouses, boyfriends, other women, society as a whole? Let's chat more in the comments about that. And if you enjoyed this week's video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and share it with a friend. You never know who might need some beloved encouragement today. I post new videos every week, so be sure to subscribe so that you never miss a video. Then I want to invite you to visit belovedwomen.org and sign up to have my weekly video devotion sent directly to your inbox. As always, thank you so much for watching. And until next time, be beautiful, be blessed, and be loved. But I refuse to believe that the daughters of God will live as slaves. Unfortunately, however, many of the daughters of God are living in slavery and don't even know it. And we cannot live free if we don't realize we are enslaved in the first place.